We've seen some very exciting things in terms of the technology that we've seen very brilliantly demonstrated by our friends at Adobe and the guys at EVS. And realistically now, we're going to try and see how all this kind of comes together, because obviously we've also touched on the front end of this, what experience we're hoping to give to people when it comes to the mobile platforms, the way people are going to consume it, and our ambitions as to how we're going to help them engage with content and drive them in to spend time within the venues themselves, and also spread the wider word about what experiences they can have across the world too, potentially. But before we kind of do that, we've heard this quite a bit. Content is king. We all understand that content is king, and ultimately what we're driving through all of these pipes, all of these systems, and onto all of these viewing devices is this content. And let's put a bit of a financial head on this and take a step back, because ultimately what is content? Content is effectively data in this concept that we're talking about here. If you really boil it down, it's kind of ones and zeros, and that's what flies up and down the fibers, and that's what we record, and that's what we shoot. So it's data. And in the real world now, there's a transformation happening in the big world of data, and when you look at it from an executive financial level, there's some changes happening in what data is meaning to companies. And by what I mean by that is this: ultimately now, data is really seriously now becoming an asset on your balance sheet. Now, in some contexts, that might mean what we call big data. It's data about you and I, and all places, your Tesco's Club Card and everybody else is gathering data about you. That has values to institutions. Similarly, though, media is data. And a recent survey done by SAS has actually come up with there about 20% of large-scale UK enterprises now are assigning financial value to the data on their balance sheets. And we need to sort of start to consider that in the background, really, as we start to decide about investment strategies and commercial strategies for how we might want to utilize some of the core technologies we've been talking about today and the opportunities that lay before us. So, let's talk about assets. Content can become assets. Content isn't necessarily automatically assets. We've talked about it before. It's a very loose sense. We could shoot the hell out of everything, but actually not actually shoot anything that was particularly usable. So content can quite often end up on the cutting floor and be of no use to anybody. I myself, as an editor for many years, have spun through no end of 20 minutes when they left the camera on in the boot of the car as they went from location A to location B. Content in itself doesn't necessarily have any inert value or any use to us unless we actually do it so it does represent an asset. So how do we turn that? Well, this is your content. There's a number of areas that we all know and love already. We've been talking a lot about the fan engagement side of things. Content can be used, obviously, to help us internally within organizations across performance coaching and then reaching out into the education world. Other enterprises we can do is push our content in a visual, moving way into the concept of digital match programs, for instance. We already use it, I'm sure, in our Marcoms. At the top there, we can also then engage with our local digital media, because our local press in the areas that we live in and we ply our trade effectively are now hungry for more and more content. We could be feeding into that too. Let's not forget heritage. Heritage is a very important point. It's a difficult one sometimes as to actually assigning where the value lies in that. But ultimately, it's something that as institutions, as they mature and as they realize the value internally to themselves about being proud of their heritage, it's something else that people should be considering about their investment. And also then there's the thought about ongoing clip sales potentially as well. So this is all about investment, and how do we do this kind of investment, and what strategies do we have? So we need to maximize this investment. Some of it we could do by possibly considering we widen out where our audience base might be. In international reach, we've now got the opportunity in some of the digital means to communicate in a much wider sense. So, you know, finding out and communicating with expats and foreign players. My brother-in-law, for instance, he's a Coventry fan. He's in Shanghai. He's spending the next 3 years in Shanghai. he's a devoted Coventry fan and would love to find out a bit more about his favourite team. And those consumers are out there, and the possibility of communicating with them and bringing that in as well has possibilities too. The other big area of production, we've touched on this before, and there was a question yesterday about it too, about quality. And I think it's important that part of our investment should be in production itself. We shouldn't underestimate what quality is, because if we can recognize the value of something that's actually crafted, we will be creating what is something that is much more closer to an asset for us in terms of our financial proposition, rather than a ton of content that we're generating. So going for that, it doesn't mean we've got to put a lot of money behind it necessarily. In my experience in production, those that do the best out of this are doing it intelligently. They're shooting intelligently. They're thinking about things before they go out. They're allowing creativity and style to be used in the planning of any shoot or any acquisition of any content. And therefore, when you come back into an edit or you come back into an environment that you're going to be using that content, the pre-planning and the thought process behind it, and then the way you've shot it, you will end up with something that looks and communicates an awful lot better and stands a chance of really being that asset that you want. So here's a statement I think is quite important, and I'll read it out as well for you now. But as more companies grasp the importance of high quality and original content for their marketing, it will become more important for both B2B and B2C organizations to offer a distinct and original voice in a world where more and more companies are competing for attention. Underline this point about the quality of the product that we generate. We are going to be competing with a lot of other people who are generating content. If your voice stands out amongst those, you stand a better chance of having a wider reach, being more appealing, and having the return to your sites and to your content. So, what else? Well, let's put together now the strategy of to how you could ensure that this investment really has the best chance. So, number one, storage. That's a bit funny. We've sort of gone straight back to technology. Storage is actually really, really important. We've spoken about the way Adobe Anywhere. Well, that kind of works, and you can edit anywhere, can't you? Well, the reason you can edit anywhere is actually your media is actually sat on some storage. In this case, it's here in this building, and that storage is serving up to you wherever you're editing. Now, that's great. We all need storage. The EVS guys as well have spoken about storage. Nothing works in this world without storage. And it's a very, very important thing to consider, because if you don't consider it, you might start to run into some interesting areas where you're kind of losing the value of your investment. So how do we maximize it? So we invest in storage. The part and parcel of what the proposition here with ADI is part of the service you get is the storage that your Adobe Anywhere would run on. That's fine and that's great. But remember, we have to store wisely, because you will save money if you do store wisely. The same applies for us at home. We've seen it all over the land. All these self-storage businesses that are around our country, they prick us with in the conscience that actually, well, we're a bit cluttered in our house, or we need to do this. They're getting us to store our content with these storage companies, but they know for a fact we're not going to touch it again, and we're just going to keep paying them again and again and again. And we will just need more and more storage. If you're wise about your storage, then you will be saving money in creating your investment and able to move and put that money into other things potentially. The other big thing is managing your media as well. So in the techie world of techiness, there are jokes that are available. This is probably the best one, so don't hold your hopes up. There are two types of storage: new and full. I told you it was a good one. The reason about this is basically, this is my experience across 27 years of post-production editing and digital media management. You buy new storage and it's empty. 2 weeks later, it's full. It's very, very soon before your storage becomes completely full, which is a good thing because you're generating content, and hopefully that's quality content. A lot of the time, it's storage for work that is in progress, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows. So you have to be careful and mindful of this. So how do we do it? We manage our content. Now, another important statement really. This is so true and is applicable to the number of enterprises that I've worked with over many years. The rapid growth of this digital media and recognition of the need to manage it often catch the enterprise by surprise. I kid you not. It is unbelievably true. Enterprises tend to have a limited understanding of the real scope and severity of just how poorly managed their digital media is and all of the work that's involved in producing, maintaining, and delivering digital media products. Really, really true. It comes as a shock to everybody. We've got our storage, we're going to start editing. Ooh, crikey. Now, we're running out of space. Can we have some more space? We've got to do this. It's really urgent. And we keep filling up the bucket. So, manage the media. If we manage the media, then we can actually keep on track with our investment, if you like, and understand that the important bits we need near to us are kept near to us, because that's the principle by which the Adobe Anywhere platform works and how the general storage principle it is. If you don't manage the media, you will ultimately pay the price, and you will then consume way more storage, but more importantly, you might end up with something that's relatively unwieldy, and your grand plan of this amazing creative content machine and manufacturing process delivering to the whole of the world starts to grind to a halt as it's slowed down. So, the third one, metadata, unbelievably important. I'm carrying metadata around now, as you are too. This tells you everything you need to know about me to a degree. And this is ultimately true. There is no value in a diamond that you can't find. And metadata is unbelievably important in this storage game as well. The efficiency by which you can find stuff really defines your ability to use that content. Another true phrase, there is profit in media assets, but only with the right metadata strategy. An effective metadata strategy is at the heart of this, and the end-to-end production workflow that enables users to create, preserve, and exploit metadata will give them a competitive advantage over their peers that are unable to effectively extract value from their output. If you invest the time and the money into actually making sure that the cataloging of your media, the way you then end up using it, and the way that you actually are able to describe it once you've created other assets from it, means that this stuff is at your fingertips. Super important. So, the other one is use big data too, that bit we talked about before. It's so important to try and wrap some of this other data that you have available to you about the fan base, about what's happening on the websites that you have, and try and tie that up also to the media that you're generating. Also look for other data sources too to go with your media. We know for a fact in a lot of stadia, a lot of the logging companies that are out there and the data companies are actually in the stadium creating that data in the first place that is about the actual activities that are going on the pitch, around the track, or wherever you are. So finding ways to possibly tie those data sources in together is another way of looking at the models. And we've seen it with Garant, some of his products too. He's already trying to make this kind of happen so that there is the opportunity for you to absolutely knit the two together, because it helps you. You don't want to redo the process later on. Let's try and tie it up together as early as we can, because it then persists with the media throughout its lifespan. Okay. The other one, join forces. We know we're under pressure from budgets. It is an impossible thing to suggest that stadia and venues around the world are going to be able to just do their own thing and create everything themselves, and I don't just mean in content terms, but actually the systems and the structures under which, and the infrastructure that all this needs to happen. This is very much Garant's proposition here, and that's why we endorse, and that's why IMG is partnering up with ADI as part of this too, because we believe there is significant value in joining forces. There's no point falling into the trap of trying to reinvent or persist with ineffective tools in the environment when you could engage with a progressive system that actually, by virtue of many people being involved in it, brings down the overall barrier to entry in the first place, and the interesting bit is the incremental cost of doing more, ultimately then, the next phase. because we could then, as a joined up approach, actually start to be able to achieve things in a combined way. So, an example of this, IMG, we represent in a representative level the libraries and the archives of 40 of the world's biggest sporting federations. For years, these have been dusty tapes sat on shelves and have very much been sort of an annex to a lot of the rights agreements that have come along. In the last 3 years, we've been doing an awful lot of work to actually transform what was probably good content into definitely good content, accessible content, actually stored in a data center environment in the world of LTO in a digital form that was actually usable by the world at large and not just locked away in a vault somewhere. That's the difference between a content and an asset. So that was a process that we set up over the last 3 years. It came out originally from the digital side of us actually having to have a much more organized way about how we help our production teams within IMG create content and use content. But we've grown it now to the point where it is now a digital archive and really represents a significant volume of holdings. So the IMG Studios asset management system is the big archive. It is a data center class, world-class archive, sat in the middle of Stockley Park, and effectively sits there and represents everything that a federation needs. And the problem was that actually not everything a federation, because we talked about heritage, we talked about coaching, we talked about other aspects of stuff. There are certain things that federations feel that actually this is for us, but we do want to have a commercial outlook on life. We want to try and find a commercial viability for some of our assets, but not these assets. We don't think there's commercial viability. So in conjunction with them, we help sort through and give a commercial pipeline so that we can say, okay, let's look at your commercially viable assets. They're the ones we've got to look at oiling the wheels for the rest of maybe your digitization processes for some of them, because some of our content goes back to the early 1900s when you look at the early golf stuff for the Open and Wimbledon. So we launched the IMG SVA, IMG Sports Video Archive.com, the centralized global federation content site. This is a site that spreads everywhere around the world and is a professional B2B site for access to some of the highest spec sports content around the world. Currently, the big players on that are our friends at the Premier League, the IRB, the All England Club, which obviously includes Wimbledon, the RNA, which is the Open, and ATP, as well as ETP, the European Tour as well. That is a front-facing commercial portal which is which gains its power from the actual main archive itself. And they are separated, but only that content that is on there is visible. So under that, we then also have what we call a federation class archive. So rather than the outside-facing B2B world where the federations are looking at production companies or commercials who are looking for content or program sales on that basis, the federations themselves have also seen the opportunity of a direct portal of their own for their broadcast licensees who actually want to see not just the commercially viable content, the real fancy stuff, they want everything else round the back as well. So we've got portals opened up for direct licensee access. One of the things we do at the moment with ATP is actually live across the event. We're streaming into the portal of their event archive, as it were, in allowing licensees for direct access wherever they are in the world to pull down really important, very hot topical content, backed up by what is the main archive as well. So there's sort of 3 elements to it, if you like. We launched it last year. We're actually doing an update to it now as well, but the site looks like this. The most important thing that you understand, though, about it is there was a particular tack we took on this. This is very much a results-based archive. I spoke to you about the importance of metadata. We go through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb. and we tie it up with results. In this case, for instance, the Premier League, it's about the tables, the results, all of the data that we have available around that, because a lot of the people we feel in the professional sports world who are doing research will often come in. They won't just go Rooney and search on that. They will actually come in, look for a particular season, look for a particular team, look for a particular player, or look for a particular aspect within a particular season on a particular player. And this site will is heavily driven towards that kind of search. You can, at the very top right-hand corner there, just stick anything you like in there and it'll find it for you, as it does in Google. But ultimately, as a professional site, it's optimized not only for things that represent themselves in league tables, but across tennis, golf, any of the sports. We can actually represent that in a results tabulated form environment, which leads you to the media that you will find, which you can then take and edit with the low-res proxies. This is a Rolls-Royce site. It's probably worth me just giving you an idea of some of the content that's on it. So let's have a little look at a video that demonstrates that. Joined up. Why do I say joined up? Joined up because for each of those federations who want to have the ability to commercialize their content across the globe, the cost of the investment to every single one of them to produce an attractive, data-intensive front end that leads you into the high-resolution content is challenging. And for each of those federations to do it on their own is a bit nuts, really. And we have the main archive sat back in the background in the big data center. So in effect, joining forces with the federations, lowering the barrier to entry to the individual ones, means that overall there's the opportunity for other federations too, not some of the big commercial ones that you're seeing here, but other smaller federations who previously would have had a staggering hurdle to get over to try and also get their content globally accessible around the world. There is now a lower barrier of entry for them to join in. They can be on this site. So all of our 40 represented organizations can have a presence on here. And as I say, the barrier to entry is simply in what state the media is in the first place and how we migrate it into there, and also then how it's currently being captured and how we bring it in. We're quite lucky in the case of the Premier League, because we do the Premier League productions. The main archive is also serving the production teams that are using it, and it's a hyper-fast way of getting through into the system. And then once the rights allow, it will be available to the wider public on there. So that's why you can be able to see on the slider there, it's only 2012-13 content that's available. But that's simply how those rights work in terms of archive access for the non-licensees. But joining together means we lower the barrier of entry to this. So, here's our storage, getting fuller, it's getting fuller, and this is our problem. Now, I'm not suggesting that in terms of the stadia and the content producers of the volumes we're talking about now would actually engage in the Rolls-Royce version that I've just shown you there. It's probably, I'd be silly to stand here and say, okay, here you go, you can have it. I don't think that's necessarily, but we'll come back to that in a second for one little reason. But there is an option. There is an option for this, and it's this. There is a way we can protect our assets, those assets that we're happy with, because remember, the real issue about something like the Adobe Premiere and Anywhere and the EVS, once we've filled up that available storage, it's highly available spinning disk storage that we have here. It's not your archive. It will lead you to stuff that's a little bit older, and you will hold on there as long as you possibly can, but you're going to bust out of that storage at some point, and your archive strategy has to come into play. This is the way we can do it. Part of what we're doing with ADI is effectively a club class archive. Something that looks entirely like your own archive, branded, skinnable by you, and with an optional connection potentially into the Federation archive that also has levels of the content that you have the rights to get to. Totally separate from the Federation archives that I've just spoken to. They exist in their own right, but however, they do engage the same kind of technology and the same kind of backup that we give our federations in a very significant LTO-backed environment. Also, crucially, along the lines of the other services that ADI offer in the way live TV works, is that it's a no CapEx model. It's a service that basically has a service price to it. So, how does it work? Well, your club class archive then basically means that you have a centralized asset base for all of your assets. Now, that can include, obviously, clearly the video and the audio and all of that, but logos too, anything. These systems can actually hold stills and audio, radio, anything you like. The other nice thing is that, as you've seen from the way Adobe works, it has the ability to be integrated into the Adobe Anywhere panel, the panel that sits inside Premiere. So you can search this archive whilst you're editing. So you've got your localized content here being served up from the main storage here, but the stuff from 2 seasons ago. Remember, this is a longer term strategy that I'm suggesting to you here. I'm not saying from day one you necessarily need this. The longer term strategy means that you can start to push and separate content out so that you've now got the opportunity of keeping your localized storage, your high performance storage in a very efficient manner with all the good things you need for the here and now. And you have in very near proximity your other content that is totally safe. It's backed up. It is an asset and is accessible from anywhere due to the technologies we've already been discussing. So this is kind of how it works. So here we are in our stadium. We're running with Adobe, and we're actually editing off the edit storage, the stuff we're talking about here that you saw working yesterday. The fibers that are connecting down into Adobe, giving you your guaranteed performance in terms of your editing capability while you're in the Stadia or wherever you're accessing it from. That's great. Here's your storage that's resident here. And remember, as Geraint said before, we have fiber and high-speed data connectivity between us at IMG Studios at Stockley Park and ADI here as well. Not only do we have the facility lines that we bring a lot of the contribution from the Premier League grounds in, but also there's data capability there too. And there's the option where, in effect, what we're capable of doing is effectively pushing content into the archive with its metadata, so you can find it again, and there it will sit, ready to be served up back to you. So, another way of looking at it is like this. The archive IMG Studios sits in the middle of it and powers all of these other portals. It sits there internally to service our internal productions and is a very fast turnaround environment. We have the IMG SVA at the top there, doing the global reach of content and clip sales and program sales around the world. And then we have the Federation portal, which I described before, which is a direct licensee access into that. The club archive model sits outside of it as well. They're all separate, they're all independent, they work independently of each other and are not reliant on each other in any way, but they're effectively connected into this backbone. And we use Adobe, we use EVS, as you've seen before, and it would be great to have you come to Stockley Park at some point. You can see, but it's very significant EVS infrastructure that we have there. We're creating content using that kind of kit already as well, but these systems have the fiber infrastructure going in and out of us at Stockley Park. So, this is how it can work. We're fiber connected into ADI. We're fibered from ADI into the stadium. Your archive portal sits outside that in the big wide world of the internet, where you can log in, access your content independently. You don't have to be editing at the time. And others that you trust and can be logged onto the system can then gain access to look at that content too. You can sort it out. And here's the interesting thing. Going back to that thing I mentioned about quality, if you are generating quality content, if you saw during that promo that we just played, there were a lot of shots of not just the stars, not just the trophy lifts, but there were a lot of shots of interesting things that a lot of people want that can't really go out and shoot. People are after content that describe things, that show success, that show failure, fans' reactions, happy fans, sad fans, jumping up and down fans, that is content. And if you're generating that content, then there is every opportunity that you can also put that content up on the IMG SVA site and have a clip sales strategy that starts to bring in revenue against your assets in the background, whilst you're actually then sweating those assets that you're making as you go along during the course of the season, when you're actually providing direct fan engagement right at the point of time in and around the stadia itself. One to think about, really, but really it's a case of those assets are so important. Treat them as assets. Think about the fact you do need to keep hold of them. Don't do like my mum and dad does and shove it all in the loft, all in black bags, no labels on it, and we're going to have a hell of a time one day trying to look through and work out what the hell is up there. But with a direct strategy and understanding of what you want to do and a potential eye towards creating content that maybe one day other people as well might want to buy off you, it could be an interesting additional armory for you. So here's a good statement to kind of take away, really. It is becoming vital for live events to deliver engaging and compelling content to the audience. However, this creates additional production and publishing complexity. We've talked a lot about that. But with the help of strong collaborative platforms, publishers can quickly respond to the unpredictable ways that socially connected audiences, because they are, engage with the live content and build a viable, exploitable commercial content store. That is entirely in your reach. We have systems now that are going to be able to help you talk to each other, but in doing the kind of investments that IMG has and that Garrett and his team here at ADI have, we try to bring down the overall barrier to entry of this and also give the opportunity to incrementally add interesting developments onto it, rather than taking that entire burden yourself and running into the anguish of trying to achieve it. So, that's it really. Thank you for listening and staying awake.